Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I have Mary Lou Stevens joining me today. Thanks, Mary Lou, for joining us.
Thank you, Jackie.
Mary Lou was born in Tasmania and studied acting at the Victorian College of the Arts and played in bands in Melbourne, Hobart, and Sydney. Eventually, she got a proper job in radio where she was a presenter and music director, first with commercial radio and then with the ABC. She received great reviews for her memoir Sex, Drugs and Meditation, and which was the true story of how meditation changed her life, saved her job and helped her find a husband. Her debut novel, The Last of the Apple Blossom, and I've got my copy there to show everybody, was published by HarperCollins last year. Mary Lou has worked and played all over Australia and now lives on the Sunshine Coast with her husband and a hive of killer bees. That sounds interesting. Thanks so much, Mary Lou, for joining us. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit about The Last of the Apple Blossom.
Oh my goodness, Jackie, this book means the world to me. The idea for this book came to me like a roaring fire front, and it does start on the day of the 1967 bushfires in Tasmania, which was a massive blaze, Black Tuesday. It was on the first day back at school in 1967, and I remember it. I was 6 years old. I was at Sandy Bay Infant School where this book actually starts. So the description of what happened at Sandy Bay Infant School is pulled directly from my memory.
Oh, okay.
But the idea for this book just came out of nowhere. I do a lot of author interviews, and I'd been interviewing Monica McInerney live back in the days when that was such an easy thing to do. And we had talked a lot about grief and how grief informs her writing. And then that very afternoon, the idea of The Last of the Apple Blossom just came bang into my head. And so it's a book that starts on the day of the 1967 bushfires in Tasmania and traces the demise of the apple industry. So Tasmania used to be known as the Apple Isle, and it was just a carpet of apple blossom. So The Last of the Apple Blossom is set down the Huon Valley, which was incredibly famous for its apples. But through the years, and The Last of the Apple Blossom does, in the main, go from 1967 to 1977. And during that time, the industry basically disappeared. It was incredibly heartbreaking.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So that was the idea. And I went, oh my goodness me, where has that come from? And what do I do with that? Because I grew up in Tasmania, but I didn't know anything about growing apples. So it's a lot of research. But it's about two friends on neighbouring orchards, and there's Catherine, who is a young school teacher at Sandy Bay Infant School at the beginning of the book, and she rushes home to the family orchard where she grew up in the Huon Valley, and she finds that the orchard is in ruins, the family home is burnt down, and her brother is dead. And she vows to rebuild the orchard and the family business, despite her father being dead set against a woman running the orchard. And in my research, I had a lot of help from a female orchardist in the Huon Valley, Naomi Clark-Port. I call her my apple angel. And when I was telling her about this idea, she said, there is no way Catherine would be allowed to run the orchard in the 1960s. And I said, her brother is dead. It's only her and her brother, and her brother is dead. And she went, okay, well, in that case, yes. Because if there was any man around, in the 1960s, they would have gone to them. Now, Annie is her next door neighbour, and she's a bit older, but they've been friends for a long time. And Annie kind of taught all the stuff to Catherine that her mother wasn't brave enough to back in the 60s. And Annie has 5 sons. She gives birth to a much longed for baby girl. And she and her husband, they repair the orchard with the help of Mark. Now, here's where my musician background comes in. This is like the music just weaves its way through this book. And that's because Mark is a musician who's come down from Melbourne with his young family to try and keep the family together. He's been in a very famous pop group in Melbourne, and it's just become impossible. And so the band he was in goes off to the UK. Without him, he stays in Tasmania and comes down to the orchard, his friend Mark and Annie run it, to try and save his family. But his wife actually runs off and leaves him in charge of his young son. And it's through the young son that Mark and Catherine start to connect. Catherine having been a school teacher, and Charlie, and I just lost, really, little Charlie, the son.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot that goes on in the book because it does cover such a great deal of time. A lot of change in the world and in Australia, a lot of big events. So that's all covered in the book too.
Yeah, I read the last of The Apple Blossom and really loved it. I loved, like, there are lots of twists and turns in the book.
Yes, there's one major twist, and I've been in a writing group for about 13 years, and there's only 3 of us left. People have kind of dropped out over the years, and I gave them, I think it was draft 3. I said, okay, I'm ready for you to have a look at this, and I said, I want to know if I can get away with this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can, and they went, yes, you can. And then I worked with Monica McInerney from draft 6 through to 10. She was my mentor through the ASA's mentorship program. And she said, you can definitely get away. She said, you have got away with this.
When did that, like, I don't want to give anything away or anything, but was that something that you knew was going to happen from the start, or it was? Yeah.
Absolutely from the start, that was going to be part of it. Yeah.
And we've got quite a few people watching, which is great. So just want to say, if you're watching and you've got a question for Mary Lou, please type them in comments and I can read them out. Wendy said she loves the cover and she wonders if you picked it at all.
I didn't.
I love the gold on it. Yeah,
it's just gorgeous. And Christine, who was a part of the HarperCollins design studio, but she's left to actually up her skills. She did this beautiful cover, and I'm looking at Christine Armstrong. There we go, Christine Armstrong. And I just love it because it has that wistfulness that's in the book and the sense of hope that's in the book with the sun rising here, but it also has the ghostly apple blossom all through here. And the other thing I love is at the beginning of each chapter, you have the apple blossom. And my book launch was postponed because of lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. So it was 6 weeks after the release of the book before I could have a launch. And Fiona, what's your Instagram handle, Fiona? Pink things, pretty things, something like that. When she came to the signing table, she had actually coloured in.
Oh, really?
All these apple blossoms. And at the beginning of each chapter as well. And I was just so thrilled. I was so excited. I just loved it. With different coloured kind of glittery gel pens. Just gorgeous. So I took photos of it and sent it off to Christine, who designed the book, and she was really, really excited about it too.
Nice. And Sharon wonders how long it took you to write.
That's a great question. It took me almost a year to get brave enough to write it.
Yeah.
When this idea came to me, it actually terrified me. It did. And I tried to run away from it. And I didn't know whether I could do the story justice. So I started doing research, and I did a lot of research. There were 2 things that really, really concerned me. One was the 67 fires was so traumatic. And there are still people in Tasmania who've been traumatised by them. In fact, when I did book events in Tasmania, people would come who had lost family and loved ones in the fire. At the end of the event, we would actually share stories about the day, and there'd often be tears. So I wanted to be really respectful of everyone who went through the fires, who remembered that day, and anyone else who's suffered through a bushfire too. And the interesting thing is, when I was editing it, was the Black Summer of 2021. So it was really, it was like history was repeating itself in a lot of different ways, including the fact that our Prime Minister in 1967 was actually out of Australia. He was in New Zealand. But unlike our current Prime Minister, Harold Holt came straight back the next day. He didn't hang around with his family having a holiday. But yeah, there were lots of similarities.
Yeah.
And the other thing that really terrified me was that I didn't know anything about growing apples. And not only did I have to research about how orchardists grow apples, but I had to research the techniques in the 60s and 70s, which were far, far different to the techniques used today. And then I also wanted to pay a lot of respect to the orchardists who built the apple aisle, who made it so famous and so beautiful, and then ended up having to plough their trees into the ground when the export market disappeared, when England joined the common market. So I was really scared. This is the fourth book I've written, the fourth novel I've written, but the first one to get published, and it's very unlike anything that I'd written before. So this is a very long answer to a very short question, but it actually took me about a year before I started writing it, from that initial idea. And then it took another year to write. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I started in October 2018 and finished with Monica. Monica McInerney gave me her blessing and said, "You have written the book that I wanted to read." And that was in November 2019. And then it took quite a while. I thought, because I had Monica McInerney's blessing and she gave me this beautiful endorsement, I thought I'd be a shoo-in to get published. But I got turned down by 6 agents.
Oh, really?
And and a couple of publishers as well, before it found its right home.
Yeah, no, that's a great story behind it. Yeah. And like you mentioned about the fires, and that's something that I learnt from, like, I wasn't aware of the Tasmanian fires at all. So
you probably weren't born, Jackie.
Not quite, but and I was in New Zealand as well, so not sure.
Well, the cloud of ash actually floated all the way to New Zealand.
Yeah.
It was that bad.
So yeah, it sounds very traumatic reading like the story, but it's also good to know about that part of history as well.
And the thing is, one of the main books that I used, it was very hard to find a lot of detail about the long-term after effects of a fire during that time. There's a lot of stuff about the actual day. There's a lot of stuff about the weeks and maybe a couple of months afterwards, and then that all drops away. But I did find one book that was published in the 1970s, which was just fabulous. And he had written it, it's called Bushfire Disaster, and he had written it as a guide to where mistakes were made in the recovery of that fire. And once again, with our recent Black Summer fires, I just saw the same mistakes being played out over and over again, people not getting the help that they needed, the funding being so slow to get to them. I just thought, so much hasn't changed.
Haven't learned from mistakes.
No, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And Kelly wonders what the best part of your author journey has been so far.
I would say working with Monica. That was just such a blessing. Like I said, I got the idea for this book after interviewing Monica, and the next day I emailed her and I said, "I've had this idea for a book and it terrifies me, and I blame you because we were talking about grief and this book is going to be so big and sad, and I don't know if I can write it." And she said, "The books that scare us are the books we must write." And she said, "I can't take any of the credit for Sophie Dear Mary Lou, it's all your own." And so when I was at draft 4, I thought, I think this book is worth spending some money on. Now, I've got to say, Jackie, up until this point, I had spent a lot of money on my writing journey. And like I said, I'd written 3 other novels. You know, it was my memoir came out in 2013. I've done a lot of writing classes and master classes. I did Fiona McIntosh's master class. So I'd spent a lot of money, so I was kind of loath to spend any more. But I was thinking, oh, maybe a manuscript assessment or a mentorship or something, because I've done both of those in the past and found them really useful. And so I was looking at the ASA's mentorship program, and I was looking through the list of the available mentors, and Monica McInerney was there, and I couldn't believe it. I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
I thought, she was there right at the start, and she can be there as this to develop this book with me. And so I emailed her because I've interviewed her so many times when I was with the GGOBC and since I've left as well. So we're not friends, but we know each other.
Yeah.
We're acquaintances. And so I emailed her and I said, look, I'd really love to do a mentorship with you, but I can imagine that you have a waiting list longer than your arm. And of course you'd be too busy. And she just got straight back to me and said, no, I'd love to.
Oh,
so by the time I applied to the ASA, they said, oh, we've been waiting for your application. So I spent as much money as I possibly could to get as many hours with Monica as I could. And she was so wise, so encouraging, so generous, and so tough. And she actually said, look, she said, what draft are you up to? And I said 4. And she said, I'm not going to look at it until you've done 6 drafts.
Oh, really?
And I don't want you to send it to anyone until you've done 10. So it was just fantastic. So working with her, I wrote 30,000 extra words. I edited 15,000 out and reshaped the book. She wanted me to slow the ending right down. So I added the chapters that are not the last chapter, because that was always in, but she wanted a bit of a bridge between 77 and present day. So I put those chapters in. And that classic thing, and I've heard a lot of authors say this, that someone will read a draft and they'll go, I don't understand why that character did that. And they'll say, then they'll tell the person why. And the person will go, oh, well, now I understand, but none of that is on the page.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with Monica. She said, I don't understand why that person did that. So I spent 10 minutes describing to her exactly why. And she went, oh, my God, will you put that in the book? Yeah, it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah,
it really was.
Sounds like, Sharon wonders what genre you like to read yourself, and maybe if you've got any recommendations for us.
I am so glad you asked. This is...
I've got that on my pile of books to read, but I haven't got to it yet.
Honestly, this is my favourite read of last year. Karen Brooks, Australian author, lives in Tasmania. She actually interviewed me for my book launch in Hobart.
Okay.
And I love her historical fiction, and this one just takes the cake. And especially last year in all the lockdowns and everyone was just so over everything, and this is a romp. This is such fun. And the main character, the good wife of Bath, she's so feisty, and she goes through a lot. But Karen Brooks is just a magnificent storyteller. Her historical fiction is just brilliant. I do love reading historical fiction because I like the setting, the time and place, and I know it's all about story and storytelling, but I also like learning something. I really do. And this is what I call late historical. The Americans don't. In Australia, we'd call late historical anything that's older than 50 years, and this is set in 54.
Yeah.
But the Americans think that anything after World War II is no longer historical fiction.
Okay.
But to me, this is historical fiction.
Yeah.
And I've just finished reading this, and once again, a superb storyteller. I absolutely
haven't heard that one.
Loved that book. Yeah. So they're 2 of my favourites.
Yeah, thanks for those recommendations. Just wondering if you could tell us, had you always wanted to be a writer, or what point did you decide that you wanted to be?
Jackie, I used to do a designated books and writing segment when I was a presenter with the ABC. And so I've interviewed a lot of authors, and so many of them would tell me that they wanted to be a writer from the year dot, and they wrote their first book about a bunny when they were 5. No, not me. I wanted to be an archaeologist.
Oh.
But then I had a life-changing experience when I saw The Stranglers when I was living in Sydney when I was 18, and I went to a gig of theirs at the State Theatre, and it just changed my life because I heard that bass sound and I went, that's what I want to do. So my whole aim was actually to be a famous singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
So I was writing, but it was songs, and it's very, very different. So I played in bands for years, had a lot of fun, put out CDs, toured, but it never got anywhere. But no regrets at all. But what happened is I did a music lovers tour of the USA in my first year working with the ABC. It was really the first year I could afford to go overseas because being a musician, and I was also an actor, you make absolutely nothing. I mean, authors make nothing, but boy, oh boy, being a musician, it's tough. And being an actor. So I went on my music lovers tour, and I came back with 12 very fuzzy photos. This was before cameras on phones. I took a little Instamatic camera with me. And one of my colleagues at work said, clearly you're not a photographer, Mary Lou. Why don't you write about your music lovers journey? Because I would love to hear it. I went to New York and New Orleans and Memphis and Nashville, and I just, soaked up music wherever I went. And so I wrote this thing called My Holiday, like it was, a primary school composition after the summer holidays. You always had to write My Holiday. And he loved it so much that he recommended to his mate, who was the news editor of the local newspaper on the Sunshine Coast, that I become a columnist. So I actually wrote a column every week, and I got paid for it. And I was in my 40s, and that's how I got interested in writing. And I started writing short stories, and then I started doing courses. And so it's not something that came to me from the age of 5. I was very, very late to it. And I'm a debut novelist at the age of 60. This came out, when I turned 60. So it's never ever too late.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, a great inspiration.
Mm.
Geraldine wonders if you've got another book on the go at the moment.
I certainly do. I've been contracted to write, and this is the first time it's ever happened to me. So the Last of the Apple Blossom was a 1-book deal, and then HQ, Harlequin Australia, offered me a 2-book deal.
Okay.
Off the back of this. So I'm in a situation I've never been in before, where I'm writing a book that already has a contract. It's a whole new experience for me.
How do you find the pressure?
Oh, look, it's interesting because when it happened, people said, you must be so excited. And I said, I just feel really grounded. I feel like I'm in the middle of my own life. I mean, I have been pursuing this writing dream for 14 years. And yes, my memoir came out in 2013, and I thought I was set, but I wasn't. Getting published as a fiction author is completely different and a lot harder. But when I was offered this latest 2-book deal, I just went, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And this book that I'm writing now, I just love so much that, and I've got a fair chunk of time to write it. So I don't feel pressured. I do feel excited now because I think this book is a cracker. I know you're not supposed to say that about your own work. I mean, I'm in the first draft, Jackie, and it's all over the place. I mean, it's a dog's breakfast. And I go, oh God, I hope I can pull all this together. But the general theme of it, and where it's going and where I know how it's going to end up. Because I had to write a synopsis. I hadn't written the book. I just had I just had an idea, and my publisher said, can you write us a couple of chapters? Can you write us a synopsis? Because we had to go and pitch it. And I'd already done all the research. but I hadn't written anything. So I had to write a synopsis for a book I hadn't written, which for authors on contracts is what they always do, but I've never been in this situation before. So it's kind of like, oh, I'll just make up the synopsis and hopefully it'll bear some resemblance when it's finished. But it's an odd experience to know for the first time in my life, and in this 14 years of writing, that I'm writing something that will actually get published.
Yeah.
I won't have to do the rounds. I won't have to go through all that agony. And it is agony.
That
Getting
must be
rejected
a good feeling.
agony.
Yeah.
So I've declared this my year of the hermit. I'm just staying home and writing because I do have a deadline, and I would love to have time to do 10 drafts, but that's not going to happen. So I just want to get as many in as I possibly can.
Yeah. And another historical fiction?
So this one, I'm just looking at my pile of research that's next to me. This one is set in 1921-22 in Hobart, and it's based around the opening of the Cadbury Factory.
Oh,
so it's the first.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
The first Cadbury Factory that was opened overseas. So and it happened to happen in Tasmania. And as a kid, that was always our favourite school excursion, going to the Cadbury Factory. And also, but this is the thing, Jackie, I actually wanted to write a book about Quakers because my grandparents were Quakers. I went to the Quakers, the Friends School, the Quaker School in Hobart. So instead of going to chapel or church, we'd go to the meeting house and sit in silence, which is what Quakers do. And as I've gotten older, I've become more interested in their philosophy, which seems actually more and more relevant for these days, of simplicity, frugality, pacifism, stewardship of the earth, equality, all this stuff that the Quakers were into back in the 1600s. They were just so way ahead of their time. And I thought, but who's going to want to read a book about Quakers? And then, of course, I remember that the Quaker families started all the big chocolate firms, like Rowntree's, Fry's, Terry's and Cadbury's and others. They were all Quakers because they wanted people to drink hot chocolate instead of drinking alcohol. That's how that whole thing started. Very into temperance. And I thought, oh my God, here we are. I can do a story about Quakers, but wrap it up in the opening of the Claremont factory, Cadbury Factory, and also include the spies. So industrial espionage was actually huge in the chocolate industry, massive. So Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
Yeah, and that's got the spies and...
so when Charlie asked Grandpa Joe, why does no one work in the chocolate factory anymore? We never see anyone coming and going. And Grandpa Joe gives him this speech about spies. And because everyone wanted to steal Willy Wonka's ideas, he got so sick of it, he just, sacked all the workers. And that comes from truth. It was massive. Everyone was trying to steal each other's ideas. And Cadbury had the best-selling chocolate at the time, and so everyone was after that recipe. So I've included all that industrial espionage stuff. So
that sounds really interesting.
I'm really enjoying it. And having said that, it is the early 1920s, and there's still a lot of ripples from the First World War, the Great War, that come through the story too. So, there is that twist of sadness in it.
And you said you're contracted to 2 books. Are you the sort of person who's thinking about the book ahead as well?
Yes.
And how do you find that? Like, you're trying to do one, but you've still got the other one in the back of your mind.
Yeah, well, when I talked to my publisher about it, I said, this is the idea I've got for the other one. We just talked briefly about it. But I've kind of changed my mind about that. There's another book that I've got a couple of books on the back burners that I've always wanted, 3 actually, that I've always wanted to write. And so I'm leaning towards another one, which will actually be historical fiction set in the 1840s in Tasmania. So
quite a lot.
But we'll see. That's a way off.
Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, I lost where I was for a minute.
I do that all the time.
What was have you got any advice that you would give a new writer?
I love giving this piece of advice, and it's not mine. It came from doing Fiona McIntosh's commercial fiction masterclass, which I thoroughly recommend. And Monica is amazing. Anyone who does her masterclasses, she just supports you to the hilt forever after. She's amazing. But I turned up to her fiction masterclass, I think it was 2015, and my memoir had already come out with a major publisher, and I had this book I was writing that wasn't the first novel I'd written. I think it was the second one. And I thought it was, pretty good. And so I kind of felt pretty special, And there we are. I think there were 18 of us in this masterclass, and we're all sitting around in this room. And, it's not cheap doing one of Fiona's masterclasses. So I'd spent thousands of dollars, and then, there's travel and accommodation, all that stuff. And we're all sitting down there waiting for these pearls of wisdom that are going to help us write this massive bestseller. And the first thing that Fiona says is, nobody cares. The world does not need your book. And I was shocked. I was horrified. I thought, no, I'm special. I'm a writer. I'm a published writer. I'm so special. And she went, nah, nobody cares. And then she said, and the less I care, the better I write. And I thought, I don't believe you, because she does impeccable research. She's an amazing author and so prolific. She just astounds me. And I thought, I don't think that's true. So I didn't really quite get it until I was writing one of my other never to be seen or the light of day novels. And I got to a stage where I needed to kind of do a transition chapter where things needed to happen to get everywhere where they needed to be and the plot where it needed to be. And I was having so much trouble and I was tearing my hair out. And then I remembered, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
And it just freed me up. It completely freed me up. And I just started writing. And I went, oh, now I understand. Yeah. It's this whole kind of weight of expectation or imposter syndrome or I'm hopeless at this or I don't know what I'm doing or people are going to hate what I'm writing and all those insecurities that we have. If you just remember, nobody cares. Yeah. It all goes away. And writing is so much easier. So that's when I realised that Fiona McIntosh is actually a genius. And she wasn't lying. She was actually telling the truth.
Yeah. No, that's great advice to share.
And my other thing is for anyone who has writer's block, because I've done a lot of meditation, which is, and my memoir is about the first 10-day silent meditation retreat I ever did and how it changed my life. But for writers, if you go and sit in silence for 10 days, you're going to come up with so many ideas.
Yeah.
Your mind is just going to keep going. So I'm a big believer in meditation and daydreaming, because I tend to do a lot of daydreaming while I'm meditating. Yeah. And that's the thing about meditation, you cannot stop your mind. That's not the point of meditation. You can't shut your mind up completely. All you can do is kind of slow it down a bit.
No, great advice. I'm wondering, when you, like in The Last of Apple Blossom, there are some really emotionally scenes in that. How do you get into the right mood to write an emotionally draining scene?
Oh Lord, that's a great question. I don't think it's a matter of getting into the right mood. I think it's just doing the writing and sobbing your way through it.
Yeah.
I cried so much writing this book. I sobbed. And every time I wrote that last chapter, and like I said, I did 10 drafts and then I had 4 edits with my publisher, every single time I would cry. Yeah. Every single time. So I knew what the scenes needed to do, and I knew what I hoped to achieve by that. And because it did have so many drafts, and because Monica wanted more detail, and then my publisher wanted more detail, I actually, the whole editing process with my publisher, you think of editing as being, making things shorter. It actually grew longer.
Yeah.
They wanted more, and Monica wanted more. So the book just kept getting longer. And so having that time to actually layer a lot of that emotion in and to get down into the core of it. And there's one of the chapters where Catherine walks away from Annie and she's heartbroken. And probably for the first 9 drafts, I was never happy with that. It just didn't touch me in the way that I hoped it would. And then I finally got it. And now I just love the ending of that chapter because you really get a sense of this aching void within Catherine because she's lost everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it actually takes more than one draft for me to actually get that depth of emotion into a scene.
And do you have a favourite place to write?
I do. I don't sit at a desk. I actually have tried everything to stop my back from hurting when I sit at a desk, and nothing has worked. So I prop myself up. My writing room is called Wilma. It's the spare room.
Okay.
And it's called Wilma. My husband, he doesn't have a shed, so he can't call it the shed. It's the garage, so he calls it Fred.
Okay.
So he's got his own space, which is Fred, and I have my own space, which is Wilma. So Wilma's my writing room, and there's just a single bed in here, and I prop myself up, and I have the windowsill as a shelf to put a cup of tea on. I have this little kind of lap desk to put my laptop on. I make a little nest out of pillows.
Oh, nice. Sounds divine.
And I can sit there and write. I went to all the expense of getting the ergonomic stuff so I could work at a desk. I just prop myself up with pillows. I sit on the bed, and that's how I write. And I write in silence. I write in isolation. I cannot write in cafes. I cannot write with music. I'm one of these people who just needs to be distraction free.
Sounds like a great reading space as well. Is that where you read?
Sometimes I do because the light is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I kind of stretch out. I don't sit. It's like when you have a meditation space. And so when you go to meditate, it's so much easier just to get into that meditative state. And I find the same with having the same writing spot. When I sit in my writing spot and gather my nest of pillows around me, it's as I'm getting into that state of mind, that state of being, which I would never have in a cafe.
No.
It just wouldn't happen. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. Just
my pleasure.
Wondering if you want to let people know how they can keep in touch with you.
Sure, I'm on all the usual socials. Well, no, I don't know if people are going to TikTok. I'm avoiding that. I'm too old. I'm 61 now. I don't think all the young ones want me on TikTok. So Instagram, Mary Lou Stevens Writes. Twitter, I think it's Mary Lou Writes. Facebook, Mary Lou Stevens and Mary Lou Stevens Writes. And my website is all the W's, maryloustevens.com.au. I've been trying for years to get maryloustevens.com. Someone's got it. They won't let it go. They haven't done anything with it. But I don't know. So it's maryloustevens.com.au.
Yeah. All right.
And my newsletter sign up is in my bio on all my, I think it's on Twitter as well. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I send out I call it my very occasional newsletter because if I don't have anything wonderful or a great recipe, and there will be some great recipes coming with this latest book.
Oh, sounds good.
But I have a lot of apple recipes in my newsletters with the last of the apple blossom. But
and lots of
I'm not going to pop up in anyone's email folders, and unless I've got something that's worth reading.
So we can look forward to lots of chocolate recipes.
Yes, I found this magnificent vintage. I've got the PDF of it. It's a booklet which was actually produced to celebrate the Claremont factory.
Oh, okay.
So they're really old recipes. I made one yesterday, actually. It was a bit disappointing. But I will find other recipes that are a lot better.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to making recipes out of that book.
Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who joined in. Thanks for the questions that people asked.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.